I want to thank everyone for tuning in to the 25th Hour Radio Show here on Monster Radio AM 1150 and 98.5 FM WGGH. I am your host, Rob Fairless, and on the phone with me today is Bill Hanna. Currently, Bill is the executive director of the Dean and Barbara White Foundation, but Bill is actually here to discuss his service to our country as a member of the United States Army, where he served as a paratrooper as well as a sentinel at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, located at Arlington National Cemetery. Bill, thanks for taking a few minutes out of your day to join me on the show.
Thanks, Rob. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you. Bill, I think the best place to start this show off would be to ask you about your decision to join the Army in the first place. What inspired you to sign on the dotted line and become a member of our armed forces?
Sure. So I'm not from a military family. A lot of people ask that, and but I always had this sort of desire to do it. I was one of those kids that grew up, playing in the woods, and even if you don't have a gun, you make one out of a stick, and spent a lot of time doing that and had fun with it. But went to college, and while I was in college, I always just sort of had this desire to go do that, to go serve, and just felt like this obligation. And it's really not anything I can explain, in a logical sense, but other to say it was a matter of, emotions in the heart and loving the country and things like that. So I made a decision to enlist, and it's one of the first things that I did that I get to blame on my wife. And my wife that my wife now and has been for 25 years. And it's kind of funny that I say it that way because I had just met her in college, and we were just getting to know each other. And I told her, man, I'd really like to serve. I'd love to go and, jump out of airplanes and all this kind of thing. And she said, you know what, you need to follow your heart and go do that. So, so I took her advice and I did it, and much to my parents' dismay.
Now, of course, I want to discuss your Army career in further detail, and we will, but I think the best thing to do would be to connect the dots a little bit later in the interview. The major reason you're here with me today is to discuss your time as a sentinel at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. For those who might not know, a sentinel is basically a guard whose job is to stand and keep watch over something. Let's talk about the tomb itself. What's the history behind the tomb? How did it first come to be?
Sure. Well, the centennial is this year of the interment of the World War II unknown soldier. And so it's been around that long. Really was based on the idea that we had people that were obviously killed and wounded in every conflict, but then those who were unidentifiable after the fact. And so there were other memorials for that in other countries. We didn't have one. And so after World War I, there was a call for that. And so at present, so you had World War I, there's one for World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. The Vietnam unknown was disinterred back in the 90s. I was actually a part of the disinterment where we removed the casket from the tomb, and I can talk about that a little bit later if you'd like. But it started off. It's been guarded by different units throughout the years up until it's 1948 that the old guard the unit that guards it now took over that function. Has been doing it 24 hours a day, 365 days a year since. And that was done because it was a pretty casual environment around it prior to that. And they really wanted to make sure that the dignity was kept, the respect was kept, that the property itself was not damaged in any way, shape, or form. And over the years, it's evolved as they've added, the other three into what you see today. And it's an interesting thing to be a part of in the sense that it has that steep history and that bond with our military and our nation, but also just the succession of people that have been able to serve there as guards. And you notice these minor changes that have happened over the years, but in large part, you can meet up with somebody who was there 50 years ago, and they're going to have a similar experience to you in a lot of ways, and in almost in every way, the same mindset.
So that brings us back to where I want to discuss your time as a guard. I imagine the process, and you spoke about this, the process of becoming a sentinel has changed a little since back in the 1920s. How does one begin their journey to become a sentinel today, and what's the requirements needed to officially earn a Tomb Guard identification badge?
Yeah, so that's an interesting pipeline to go through. In my particular story, just as an example of one, I had been down to see the changing of the guard a few different times before I ever went into the military. I have an uncle who's buried in Arlington, and my family and I would go visit and did the senior class trip with my high school, where we went to Washington, D.C., and got to lay a wreath at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. And so I'd seen it. I'd heard about how hard it was to get there, how small it was, and a lot of things that are said about the soldiers that are stationed there guarding the tomb. And so I thought, well, there's no way, I'm ever really going to have a chance to do that, although I'd love to do it. Right before I left to go to basic training, my grandmother, who's passed away now, came to me, and she had just been out there to see my uncle's grave. It was her son, and they had videotaped. This is back in the times when, as you will recall, there was these things. I tell kids now, these things called video recorders.
Yeah, old school.
Old school, Came home with the tape and showed me the changing of the guard, and she said, "Wouldn't it be something if you were able to become one of those guys?" And I remember looking at her and saying, "Grandma, I wouldn't count on it." And it, about a year later, I was down there as a brand new person. How that happened, I had, as I said, enlisted in the Army, had volunteered to do light infantry, airborne, which is at that particular time, just about everybody there was an infantry person, which for those that are not versed in the military terminology, light infantry is really the kind of the backbone of the military, the Army's main function, which is a ground force, So light infantry really means somebody who's carrying all the weapons they have on their back. A lot of times they may be airborne capable type of units like the 82nd Airborne, or on foot like 3rd Infantry Division, or any of these others that you hear about. The Marine Corps obviously has light infantry as well. And so being, the soldier, quote unquote, if you will. So I volunteered to go that route. And that's where the selection pool was from, to get into the Old Guard, or the 3rd Infantry Regiment in Washington, D.C. I really didn't have any plans to do that. I was originally going to be assigned to the 82nd Airborne at Fort Bragg. And I was going through my training down there, and got through basic training and went into light infantry school. And along the course of that training, I was approached by a recruiter for the Old Guard to see if I'd like to go up to Washington, D.C. and serve in that particular unit. And the way that happened was, as I'm told, at the time they were combing through over 1,000 different possibilities. And I think they invited maybe a dozen of us for consideration out of that pool. When I had gotten there, I had, already had some college, and I had run a year of college track before I went in. I had some really good scores as a result of that in terms of the physical fitness. I'd been at the top of that. I think I was the top one or two, maybe the top shooter in my class. And so they combed through folks that had some scores that were standing out, and then, your conduct and all of that. You had to have a perfect record to be recruited. So it came up as this unique opportunity, and I took the chance to go ahead and volunteer to do it. So I had left Fort Benning, which is where all that training is, and instead of getting on a bus to go to Fort Bragg after the airborne school graduation, after jump school, I went up to report into the Old Guard, 3rd Infantry Regiment. When I got there, as I said before, they have funeral functions, and so there's companies within that regiment that do the funeral services that you see. There's the caisson platoon I talked about, Continental Color Guard, the Army Drill Team, different functions like that. The specialty platoons, like the caisson or drill team, you can't be, at least you couldn't at the time, volunteer to go into that unless you'd been in regiment for a year. And so I, brand new guy, I wanted to go wherever, it was the hardest thing to do. So when I got to report in, I said, well, what's the toughest group to be in here? And because, I'd like to have as many options, and I want to do as much stuff as I can, and just kind of what I was looking for at the time. And they said, well, then you want to go to Echo Company or Honor Guard Company, which is the 1st Presidential Marching Platoon company. So I never did funerals. I was assigned to that unit, and on the Presidential Escort for a little less than 6 months, I think. President Clinton was president at the time. And I went through what they call a ROPE, or Regimental Orientation Program, which is their training program to get ready for that. And I was assigned to that group initially. So I did their missions, they call them. And some of those are arrivals of foreign dignitaries. I think the first mission I ever did with First Presidential Marching Platoon was the funeral for Commerce Secretary Ron Brown, who was the first African-American Commerce Secretary in the history of the United States, and he was killed in a plane crash over Bosnia. The plane went down over there with some other U.S. officials. And so there I was, I had been born and raised in Indiana, and now I'm at this function, and I see President Clinton and Hillary, and let's see, Jesse Jackson was there that day, and some other notable people that you see on TV pretty frequently growing up, and I think Stevie Wonder even, trying to think of some of the people that walked up, and it was surreal. I was there for an arrival ceremony at the south end of the Pentagon for Netanyahu as prime minister at the time. So I saw some pretty interesting things as a part of that group, but the whole time I was in that group, I wanted to go to the tomb. That's the premier place to go there, within the old guard and arguably in the Army. And just the attitude of the folks down there, the dedication, the bearing that you saw when you interact with someone who was down there, which is pretty rare, by the way, in the regiment. They're just such a small unit at the tomb that you just don't see those guys an awful lot. So I was looking for my first opportunity I could to be a part of that. So after I was in the marching platoon, the Presidential Marching Platoon, or Presidential Escort Platoon at Echo Company, they had tryouts for specialty platoons. And you could go to this hall there on post, which is Fort Myer, Virginia, which is right outside Arlington Cemetery. And you could sign up for these things. And so I was warned before I went, though, you have to be in the regiment for a year. And here I am in less than 6 months. And I was talking to the guys in my unit about, hey, I really want to go to the tomb. And they the attitude was, well, good luck. I mean, a bunch of people had already gone there and tried it, or up there, because the dropout rate's around 80%. So of anybody who goes to try to be a part of the tomb, 8 out of 10 people will drop. So, and again, I hadn't been there the required amount of time. So I go over to sign up and put my name down, and I'm waiting in line, and I get to put my name down. And the guy who's taking the names and doing the recruiting process there tells me, get lost, basically. After he sees that I'm real new, less than 6 months. What are you doing standing here, wasting my time? Get out of here, And so I thought, well, I'll go back and do this job another 6 months and keep trying. And I tell everybody back there, they wouldn't take me right now because I haven't been here long enough. And then you get all the stories about, well, you don't want to go anyway, and it's rough. You won't make it down there. And a lot of people have been preparing for a year and a half or something to even be able to go down into the training program, and you barely have your equipment here. So a few days after that, guy shows up in our company area. We're up there cleaning weapons, and calls my last name out, Hanna. I raised my hand, and the guy said, do you want to go down to the tomb training program? And I said, yeah, I do. I just tried to sign up the other day. When can I go? And he said, well, you need to get your stuff right now. And I said, are you kidding me? No, we've already had so many people drop out the first couple of days of this initial class that you want to go. And so I literally said to him, can I get a quarter so I can call my wife and tell her what I'm about to do? Because it's a 9-month training program. And, when I say quarter, that'll date me a little bit. We didn't have, the cell phones and all that stuff. So I literally went to your payphone in the company area. I called my wife and said, here's what I'd like to do. And she said, go for it. And so I ended up in the training program. The training program, when you get to the tomb initially, it's about 3 weeks long. It's an assessment. So they do this assessment on you to see whether or not you're going to be able to continue to the next phase and be trainable or meet the requirements. And so I had my assessment class, there were 23 of us in there, and 3 of us actually went the entire 9 months and received our Tomb Guard identification badge. So there's a lot of drop in that class. So I was the newest guy down there. I had the least amount of stuff, and as it turns out, it might have been to my favor.
Now, do you still remember the very first time you walked the mat? Were you nervous at all?
Oh yeah, yeah. So you're down there and you're in training. There's a lot of stuff on the internet about this. When you're what we call a new man, you're not allowed to speak unless you're spoken to. There's a lot of rules that go on down there when you're new. You have a lot of work to do. The standard down there is higher than any other unit in any branch of the military in terms of the military function bearing and so forth, and the things that you see, and it's for great reason. I mean, the reason's obvious to me, but we can talk about a couple things later if you'd really like, in terms of the importance of that and the way it came across to me. But you've seen this growing up, now you're with these guys. These guys are unbelievably great soldiers. They're unbelievably dedicated. You're new amongst them. You're trying to just work your way in and do everything you can. And you finally get to a point where you get to earn a walk, and you have to earn them when you're new. If you get to proficient enough where they say, okay, well, you can at least go up top, and do a guard change. It might be the first or the last one of the day, nothing in the middle of the day. You have to earn it. So you'd have to work hard to do that, come up with some additional bit of knowledge that you've ascertained on your own, or you're kind of competing with the other new soldiers to get these walks. They're coveted. So you're fighting to get it, and then you finally get one. I remember. And here you are, you're getting dressed, you're looking in the mirror, they're tightening your clothes, your belt around your waist and all that. You're holding the weapon. Next thing you know, you're walking out the door and doing what you've been training to do. And it was nerve-wracking. It was the it was one of the most honorable things that anybody could ever do, and greatest blessings in my life. And at the same time, I was terrified because it's not about the crowd or you not doing a good job. It's the gravity of the meaning of the place that sets in on you real quick. You realize, and you've realized this before, but here you are actually going out for your first time to guard the tomb, and you're on hallowed ground. There's people that have come from all over the world to see this and to pay their respects. And, it's something that, I don't think most people down there would ever forget, having gone through that the first time. And, there's a big sense of being a part of it when I came back down for the first time, thinking, I'm a part of this, and also I'm going to stick this out no matter what it takes. I'm going to get through this training program because, it's really unbelievable. Hair on the back of your neck raises up. You see that sitting there, and it's something that, you're very conscious of the idea that this is not normal, that this is it's a big thing to be a part of, that there's a spiritual gravity to it, and that there's this huge meaning for so many people involved in it. And I have to say that every time I went up, and I did 735 walks is what we call it, where you're up on the mat, actually guarding the tomb over the course of the time I was there. And it never got old. It never got to be such a routine that you took it for granted. It lost this feeling of grandeur or, like I say, the spirituality of it. It just became easier or more fluid to do the physical aspects of it and do it well, which just allowed you to think more. You had more time to really focus on what was going on around you and really what the place was about. And I often tell people this, it's very hard for me to describe it, but I've never had the feeling before or after when you would put the uniform on and you get by the door, or you step out of the quarters and you're getting ready to walk up the marble stairs and head toward the plaza where the tomb is, and go through the chains and do the changing of the guard. You're getting ready to be posted as a guard. There's this feeling, and you can see it now. Like if you go down there and visit and you watch the guys actually do this, it's almost like a light switch is flicked on. The person in that uniform becomes somebody different. They go into this mode. And my son was just there with me not too long ago visiting. He's 17 and he's been down there throughout his life, because we're kind of a family there. But he commented to me this last time, man, I see what you're talking about. I watched this guy. He was really nice. He was laughing. He was fun. And all of a sudden I saw his face just change right before he went out, and he looked almost scary. And because, you take it serious, deadly serious. But what I was going to say is when you go out that door and all of this is going on, you literally feel this presence. It's amplification of what you're doing and who you even are. Because you can, in my mind at least, and in my soul, I could feel the love and the power and the commitment and of all the people that love that place and love soldiers. And it focuses in on there, and you take this on, and I've never felt it since. It's really incredible, the way that happens, and you become almost one with the entire thing. And so when you see the guards out there, that's one thing that's really kind of, I think it comes across when you're watching it, at least subconsciously, but the idea that they are as much a part of that as anything, and yet at the same time, they're not individually important. It's about the unknowns. It's about the unknown soldiers. It's about the families that are coming there, people who have lost other people. But yet at the same time, they become such a part of the fabric, the guards themselves, that it's just sort of this spiritual link between all of that. In a human being, and that's your connection. So it's an incredible thing to have been a part of. So from the first time up, it's overwhelming to the last time you're there when it's overwhelming, because you'll never do that again. And then the space in between, you never lose that feeling.
Very, very cool. Very cool. Now, I do want to make sure I mention Gavin McElvenna, who is the current president of the Society of the Honor Guard, Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, who introduced me to you. In your own words, man, how would you describe the role of the Society of the Honor Guard, and how does it continue to honor Sentinels past and present, as well as our fallen unknown soldiers?
Well, so Gavin was, I was a guard there for 18 months total, and then the last year I was there, so I was there 2.5 years total. I did ran the training and selection program, which is the thing that I alluded to earlier, the first initial 3 weeks where you have the guards come down and you go through that process. Gavin was actually one of it's funny to say, he was one of my trainees, and the reason I say it's funny to say that is because he also was my boss at the end of that process when he graduated and received his Tomb Guard identification badge. And so when you go through the training process there, your rank is not relevant. So you can have someone with a lower rank actually training you because that person has a badge and you do not. And there's, I don't know, a little over 650, I think at this point, roughly less than 700 right in there, in the entire time since 48, and that have been given. It's, I think, the least given out award in the Army right now, and has some unique things attached to it as well, that are talked about on the internet quite a bit in terms of a lifelong obligation. It's the only award in the Army like that. But at any rate, so Gavin came through the training program there, and we ended up being friends. We worked together the rest of the time that I was there. He was involved in my last guard change or walk, the last time I ever guarded the tomb. And we've been friends ever since. The folks that I served with there are like brothers to me, of course. And but Gavin really, when Gavin and I were there, we had a gentleman named Richard DeZero come down who was a former guard years and years ago. And he said, it'd be great if we could get people together and communicate with one another. And again, this is back in, by now, 98, 99. We didn't have the internet, so tracking people down was rough. We had a board down there that they still have called the badge board, where everyone who has a badge, their name is up on that board. So Gavin and I were part of the group that decided, well, with Richard and our Colonel Gardner at the time, and Richard Klein, who was a sergeant of the guard, to say, let's figure out how to do our first reunion, and let's see if we can get the guys together. And so Gavin was on the ground floor of that. Now he's the president of Society of the Honor Guard Tomb, the Unknown Soldier. And over the years, it's evolved into, what it is now. And under his leadership, it's really taken off. And it's become very important in a lot of different ways. It's been important to the guys, I think, so that we can obviously stay connected. That's, not unlike anything else that has a society around it, or, sort of a fraternal kind of thing. But more than that, it's allowing us to educate people, to identify, where do each of us live? Can we go out and speak with schools? Can we keep the message out there about the importance of Arlington National Cemetery, about the unknown soldiers and what it represents? Just generally speaking, appreciation for veterans and people who serve, and being able to interact with the public in that particular way. And to be able to assist people, among our own ranks and throughout their lives. And so it plays that role. The website itself is tombguard.org, and it's visited very frequently. And there's facts on there. You can look up someone. If they say that they've been a Tomb Guard, you can actually look up their name and see if they have. Like I say, there's not a lot of us. So I always encourage, somebody will say, have you ever heard of this person or that person? I say, well, look it up on the website if it's not something that I know right away off the top of my head. But it's so, and I think it's really provided some transparency about what happens there, why we do what we do, how people are selected, who is selected to do this, and more importantly than the people that are doing the job, why the job is important.
Well, if you have any further questions concerning the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, you can go online and visit tombguard.org. They have the answers to pretty much any questions you might have about the tomb itself and the role of the sentinels that guard the tomb. Bill, I want to personally thank you for your service to our country, and it's been an honor having you on the show today, sir.
It's been all my pleasure, and I really did nothing. I was blessed the entire time I was there. I'll tell you, I served with some people who have gone on after that to do unbelievably tremendous things for this country, and those are my heroes.